Some things in life don't explode, they erode. They wear you down grain by grain until one morning you wake up and realize the ground under you has vanished. That's what it felt like the day my daughter looked me straight in the eye and said the words that would hollow me out. I never thought I'd raise my child alone, but fate rarely asks for permission. My wife died when our girl, Anna, was 10. A car accident on a rainy night took her from us and left me with a daughter whose world had collapsed. I buried my grief and became father and mother at once. Every scraped knee, every school project, every teenage heartbreak, I carried it all, even when my own heart was splitting. We didn't have much. I worked at the docks, hauling freight in all weather, and in the evenings I did small engine repairs in my garage for extra cash. Our house smelled of oil and salt water, but Anna never lacked food, clothes, or my presence. I missed nothing of her childhood, even when it meant missing everything else. As she grew, she became ambitious, smart, beautiful. People used to tell me she'd go far, that she was destined for something brighter than our little town. And when she met Kevin Williams, the man she would marry, I saw a flicker of that destiny in her eyes. He was charming, quick-witted, always talking about big plans, new ventures, opportunities that could make them rich. I didn't trust him, but Anna did, and that was enough for me to try. They married in a modest ceremony. No chandeliers or champagne, just a rented hall, some flowers, and the kind of hope that feels like sunshine in your hands. I gave them what I could, a down payment for a small apartment, my old pickup truck, and my blessing. But dreams can rot from the inside. Over the next few years, Kevin's ventures kept failing. Just a temporary setback, he'd say, always with that easy grin. Next one will be the jackpot. Anna supported him, working double shifts at a cafe while he chased schemes. I tried not to interfere, though I watched the strain carve lines into her face. Then, one evening, my phone rang. It was Anna. Her voice was tight, brittle. She asked me to come over. I drove across town to their apartment, a cramped second-floor unit above a convenience store. When I walked in, Kevin was gone. Anna sat at the kitchen table with a stack of papers in front of her. Debt notices, collection letters, numbers so high they made my stomach drop. She didn't waste time. "Dad," she said, eyes glistening but jaw firm, "we need you to cover this. Just until Kevin's next project pays off." The words hit me like a fist. "How much?" I asked, though I already knew the answer would be bad. She named a figure that could have bought my house twice over. I laughed, not out of humor, but disbelief. "Anna, I don't have that kind of money." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "You've been saving." "I know you have. Mom told me once you kept a fund for emergencies." I stared at her, stunned. She was right, I had saved. Little by little, over decades, I'd built a nest egg. Not for myself, but for her future, for the day she might need a down payment on a house, college for a grandchild, something real. But not this. Not a black hole of debt dug by a man who couldn't hold a job. "I can't," I said quietly. "That money's all I have left." Her eyes hardened, a look I'd never seen before. "So you're just going to let us drown?" "I'm not letting you drown," I said. "I've helped you every way I can. But this isn't something I can fix." Her chair scraped back sharply. "You're selfish," she spat. "After everything you preach about family, when it's your turn to step up, you won't." The words burned more than she could have known. For years I had been her lifeline. Now she was accusing me of cutting the rope. I left that night shaken. I sat in my truck in the parking lot for a long time, staring at the rain-slicked windshield, my hands gripping the wheel until my knuckles whitened. She didn't call the next day. Or the day after. But a week later, another message came, this time angrier. "If you don't help us," she wrote, "Kevin's going to lose everything. We're going to lose everything. I thought you loved me." I sat there, reading it over and over, the words blurring. "I thought you loved me." And that's when something inside me shifted. All my life, I had been the man who stayed, who fixed, who bore the weight without complaint. But this was different. This was a demand, not a plea. A rewriting of everything we'd been. That night, I did something I never imagined. I packed a bag. I emptied my safe deposit box. And before dawn I left. No note. No forwarding address. Nothing. Because sometimes the only way to teach someone what you've given is to take it away. And that's where my story begins. There's a strange freedom in vanishing. You don't realize how heavy your own name feels until you stop hearing it called, until the phone stops buzzing, until no one knows where you've gone. The first morning after I disappeared, I sat in a roadside diner 3 towns over, sipping burnt coffee, and for the first time in decades, I felt invisible. Not the kind of invisibility that comes from being overlooked, but the kind that comes from slipping through the cracks on purpose. I'd left Polaroids of Anna in my dresser, old school drawings taped to the garage wall, a life built around her smile. Walking away from all that wasn't easy. But as I sat in that diner, I reminded myself, it wasn't abandonment. It was survival. Mine and maybe hers too. I drove west with no real plan. My savings, the emergency fund I had sworn was untouchable, rode in a small lockbox beneath the seat of my truck. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to start over somewhere quiet. Every mile I put between me and Anna's demands felt like shedding another layer of chains. But the ghosts travel with you. Every motel mirror reflected not just me, but the tired father who had worked himself to the bone for a daughter who now called him selfish. I could hear her words at night, sharp as glass. "I thought you loved me." I did love her. More than anything. But love had turned into a weapon in her hands, and I refused to be bled dry by it. By the end of the first week, I'd reached a small coastal town. Fishing boats bobbed in the harbor, gulls wheeled above the docks, and the salt air carried a familiarity that tugged at my chest. I rented a room above a bait shop, cash only, no questions asked. The landlord, an old man with a limp, barely glanced at me. That suited me fine. I fell into a rhythm. Mornings fixing nets or lending a hand at the docks for a few dollars under the table, afternoons walking along the rocky beach, evenings alone with my thoughts and the hum of a borrowed radio. Nobody here knew me. Nobody expected anything from me. For the first time since Anna was born, I existed only for myself. But peace is a fragile thing. And guilt has a way of finding you even when no one else can. About 3 weeks after I left, I stopped at a library to use the computer. I told myself I only wanted to check the news, maybe see if there was any mention of dock strikes back home. But my fingers typed her name before I could stop them, Anna Williams. Her face filled the screen. A photo from her wedding, smiling, radiant. Only now it was attached to a local paper article about Anna Williams. Young couple faces financial hardship after husband's business collapse. My stomach twisted as I read. Kevin had vanished, no surprise there. Creditors were circling. Anna was left alone to shoulder debts that weren't hers, debts that could take years to crawl out from. The article quoted her once. Just one line. "I thought my father would help us. I don't understand why he left." I shut the computer down, my hands shaking. I walked out into the bright sun, but all I could see was her face. Betrayed. Abandoned. A mirror of the look she'd worn when her mother died. I had promised myself I'd never put that expression on her again. And yet here I was, the architect of her grief. For days I wrestled with it. Should I send money anonymously? Should I call? Should I drive back, swallow my pride, and hand her everything she asked for? But every time I considered it, I heard her voice from that night. "You're selfish." Not a plea, not gratitude, just entitlement. No. If I returned now, nothing would change. She'd keep leaning on me until I collapsed completely. And maybe that's what she wanted, but it couldn't be what I gave. Still, the guilt gnawed. I'd wake in the night drenched in sweat, dreaming of her as a little girl, clutching my hand on the first day of school, asking if I'd come back after work. In those dreams I always promised I would. But in waking life, I was gone. One evening, after too many sleepless nights, I went down to the docks. The sun was setting, painting the sky blood red. A fisherman I'd helped earlier that week leaned against a piling, smoking. He looked at me, squinting. "You look like a man runnin' from something," he said. I didn't answer. He flicked ash into the water. "Only trouble with runnin' is, it don't matter how far you go. Whatever's chasin' you, it'll find a way." I walked away without a word, but his voice stuck with me. Because deep down, I knew he was right. I wasn't just running from Anna. I was running from the man I had always been, the fixer, the provider, the one who stayed. And no matter how hard I tried to disappear, that man was still inside me. Which meant it was only a matter of time before the past came knocking. You can outrun a place, but you can't outrun blood. I learned that about a month after I vanished. Life in the coastal town had settled into something resembling routine. I fixed nets, patched engines, carried crates down to the docks. The men there didn't ask many questions. They took me for what I looked like, another weathered hand who'd seen too much of the world and didn't care to talk about it. That suited me fine. But even in silence, the past has a way of whispering. At night, I'd lie awake on the narrow bed above the bait shop, staring at the ceiling while Anna's voice rang in my ears. "You're selfish. I thought you loved me." I tried to fight it down, but it always came back, like the tide against the rocks outside my window. Then one morning, I stepped into the small cafe on Main Street. Same place I always went for coffee, bitter burnt, but hot enough to wake me. The bell above the door jingled, and when I looked up, my heart stopped. She was there. Anna. Her hair was pulled back tight, dark circles beneath her eyes, but it was her. My daughter. My blood. Standing in the doorway of a town I had chosen because it was nowhere. For a moment I couldn't move. My hands went numb, my breath caught. Then her eyes swept the room and landed on me. She froze too. The air between us felt like glass about to shatter. "Dad," she whispered. The cafe went silent. The waitress, halfway through pouring coffee, paused midstream. The two old men at the counter lowered their newspapers. Everyone felt the weight in that single word. I set down my mug, my hand trembling. "Anna," I said, my voice rough. She crossed the room quickly, anger sparking under her tears. "So it's true. You really just left." I had no words. I'd rehearsed explanations in my head for weeks, but none of them seemed enough now. She stood over me, fists clenched. "Do you know what it's been like since you walked out? Bill collectors banging on the door. Kevin gone without a trace. Me drowning in his mess while everyone whispers about how my own father abandoned me. Do you know what that feels like?" Her voice cracked, drawing stares from every corner of the cafe. I wanted to take her hand, to hush her, to tell her I'd fix it like I always had. But wasn't that the problem? I'd spent her whole life fixing things, and now she thought she could demand it forever. "Sit down," I said quietly. She hesitated, then slid into the booth across from me, her breath sharp, her eyes never leaving mine. For a long moment, we just stared at each other, the hum of the cafe filling the silence. Finally, I spoke. "I didn't leave because I stopped loving you. I left because you stopped seeing what my love costs me. You didn't ask me to help, you demanded it. Like I owed you my last breath. And when I said no, you called me selfish." Tears welled in her eyes, but her jaw stayed hard. "I was desperate, Dad. I thought you'd come through like you always did." "That's just it," I said, leaning forward. "I always did. Even when it broke me. But this debt? It wasn't yours. It wasn't mine. It was his. Kevin's. And you wanted me to pay it because you thought my love for you meant I had no choice." She flinched, as if I'd struck her. For a moment, the fire drained from her face, replaced by something softer. Guilt, maybe. Or just exhaustion. But then she whispered, "You left me, Dad. Just like Mom did. I never thought you would." The words hit me like a hammer. All the old promises I'd made that 10-year-old girl on the night of her mother's funeral came rushing back. I'll never leave you. Not like she did. Never. And now here she was, grown but still broken, accusing me of the very thing I swore I'd never do. I swallowed hard. Anna, I didn't leave you. I left the man you wanted me to become, a man who'd hand over everything he had to clean up someone else's mess. I couldn't do it. Not this time. Her hands shook on the table. So what now? You just disappear and let me pick up the pieces alone? Her voice wasn't angry now. It was scared. The little girl I remembered flickered beneath the surface. And damn me, but I felt my resolve falter. I don't know what now, I admitted. I don't have all the answers. But I know I can't go back to being the man who fixes everything for you, no matter the cost. If I do that, you'll never stand on your own. The silence stretched. The waitress finally set a fresh cup of coffee in front of Anna, her hand lingering awkwardly before pulling away. Anna stared at the steam rising from the cup, then back at me. I came here to beg you, Dad. To tell you how bad it's gotten. But now I don't even know what I want from you. Her voice cracked again, and for the first time, I saw not the woman who demanded, but the daughter who still needed her father, just not in the way she thought. I leaned back, my chest heavy. Then maybe that's the first honest thing you've said since this started. Her eyes filled again, and I knew this was only the beginning. She had found me. And whatever came next, the running was over. But what neither of us knew then was that Kevin, the man who'd started all this, wasn't done with either of us. There's a moment in every storm when you think the worst has passed, when the thunder fades and you almost believe the air will clear. Sitting in that cafe with Anna, watching her cup of coffee grow cold between her trembling hands, I thought maybe that moment had come. She'd found me, confronted me, cracked open her anger enough to show me the fear underneath. For the first time in months, I thought we might crawl our way back towards something resembling family. But storms don't pass just because you want them to. Sometimes they circle back, fiercer than before. It was late afternoon when the door of the cafe swung open again. I didn't notice him at first, just another man stepping in from the salt-heavy air. But Anna's sharp intake of breath snapped my head around. And there he was. Kevin. His hair was unkempt, his jaw shadowed with days of neglect, but his grin was still intact, that same easy smirk that had charmed my daughter into believing he was gold instead of tin. He spotted her immediately and lit up, as though we were all just characters in one of his endless schemes. "Anna!" he said, too loud, too bright. He strode toward the booth, ignoring the wary glances from the other patrons. "I knew I'd find you here." Her chair scraped as she half stood. "Kevin? What are you doing here?" "Looking for you, obviously. And your dad." His eyes flicked to me, narrowing slightly before he forced another smile. "Hello, sir. Long time no see." I stayed seated, my body tense. "You've got nerve walking in here." He laughed, as though I'd made a joke. "Nerve's what gets things done, right? Listen, I know things got messy. But I've got a new plan. A real one this time. Just need a little help to get it started." I stared at him, disbelief boiling into rage. "You left her drowning in debt and disappeared. Now you come crawling back asking for more?" Anna looked between us, her face pale, caught between the love she once thought she had and the reality standing before her. "Kevin, you told me you were working things out. You told me." "I am," he interrupted quickly, sliding into the booth beside her as though he belonged there. "Babe, this one's different. It's already in motion. We just need capital, and then everything turns around. We'll pay off the debts, we'll start fresh, we'll finally get the life we deserve." His words were honey, but I heard the poison underneath. I leaned forward, my voice low and sharp. "You don't get another dime. Not from me. Not from her. You've bled this family enough." His smile faltered, just for a second. Then he leaned back, spreading his hands. "Come on, old man. Don't be like that. You've got savings. Anna told me." You've been sitting on it while she suffers. The air in the cafe thickened. My fists clenched on the table. You have no right to speak about my money. None. You've done nothing but take from her. Kevin's eyes flashed, the grin finally cracking into something uglier. And what about you, huh? You disappeared. You left her alone. Don't act like you're some hero. You're just as guilty. The words hit hard, because they weren't entirely wrong. But guilt doesn't erase the truth. I wasn't the one who dragged her into this pit. He was. Anna's voice wavered. Kevin, please stop. But he didn't stop. He leaned closer, his voice dropping so only we could hear. You think you can just vanish and wash your hands of it? Doesn't work that way. These debts aren't going anywhere. And if you don't pay, they'll come collecting in other ways. A cold dread slid down my spine. He wasn't just talking about bills anymore. I met his eyes, steady, unflinching. If you've dragged her into something dangerous, I swear. He cut me off with a laugh, leaning back again, louder now, his grin snapping back into place for the onlookers. Relax. It's all under control. Just need a little family support, that's all. But I knew. I saw the twitch in his jaw, the flicker in his eyes. Things weren't under control. He was in deeper than either of us realized, and he was desperate enough to drag us both under with him. Anna sat frozen, tears glistening but unshed. She looked at me, then at him, torn in two. And I knew this was the moment everything hinged on, whether she finally saw him for what he was, or whether she'd keep clinging to the dream he kept dangling in front of her. I leaned toward her, my voice calm but firm. Anna. Look at him. Really look at him. This isn't love. This isn't partnership. This is a man who will take and take until there's nothing left of you. Her lips trembled. Kevin's hand shot out to grab hers, squeezing hard. Don't listen to him, babe. He's just bitter. He doesn't want us to succeed. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to hold still. Then, slowly, Anna pulled her hand from his grip. Kevin's face darkened. His smile collapsed into something hard, dangerous. You'll regret this, he hissed. He stood abruptly, knocking the table with his knee, rattling the cups. The bell above the cafe door jangled as he stormed out, leaving a trail of tension in his wake. Anna stared after him, shaking, her breath ragged. And me? I sat there, my hands trembling, knowing one thing for certain, this wasn't the last we'd see of him. Kevin wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. There's a chill that comes after a threat, one that doesn't leave even when the sun is warm on your skin. After Kevin stormed out of the cafe, that chill lingered. Anna sat across from me, her shoulders hunched, her hands trembling as she twisted a napkin to shreds. I tried to speak, but the words died in my throat. Anything I said would sound like an I told you so, and that was the last thing she needed to hear. We left together, stepping out into the salty air of the harbor town. The gulls wheeled overhead, crying against the wind, and for a moment it felt like the world was moving on while ours had frozen in place. Anna walked beside me silently, her eyes locked on the ground. Finally, she whispered, "He's not going to stop, is he?" I sighed, the sound heavy in my chest. No. Men like Kevin don't stop. They run out of excuses, out of charm, out of luck, but they don't stop taking until they burn through everything. Her face crumpled, but she didn't cry. She'd already shed too many tears for him. Then what do I do? I stopped walking, turned to face her. You cut him off. For good. No more money, no more chances. You rebuild without him. She looked at me, her eyes wide with fear. But the debts, he said, people will come. I grabbed her shoulders gently, forcing her to meet my eyes. If anyone comes, they'll find me first. Do you understand? You're not alone in this, Anna. Not anymore. For the first time since she'd found me, she collapsed into my arms. The weight of her body against mine felt both familiar and foreign, like holding the little girl she used to be and the woman she had become all at once. I wrapped my arms around her, steadying her trembling frame. But I knew this was only a pause in the storm. That night, I lay awake in my small rented room, listening to the hum of the sea through the thin walls. Every creak of the building made my nerves jolt. I expected Kevin to kick down the door, to drag Anna back into his mess by force. My fist itched for the fight, but beneath the anger was fear. Fear that I'd waited too long, that I'd already lost too much of her to pull her free. 2 days later, the threat materialized. I was walking down the docks, hauling a crate for one of the fishermen, when I saw them. 2 men I didn't recognize leaning against my truck. They were clean-shaven but rough around the edges, cheap suits that didn't fit right, eyes that scanned too much of the street. They didn't belong here. One of them straightened as I approached. "You Peterson?" The name felt like a noose tightening around my neck. I set the crate down slowly. "Who's asking?" "Friends of Kevin," the other said, his grin sharp and humorless. "He owes us. Your family. Family pays." I stared at them, my jaw tight. "Kevin's debts aren't mine. And if you're smart, you'll turn around and walk away." They laughed, but it wasn't the kind of laugh that came from joy. It was the kind that came before violence. The taller one stepped closer, his voice dropping. "You think you get to choose? Dead has a way of finding the people closest to you. Your daughter, for example." The words froze me. I took a step forward, my fists clenched. "Leave her out of this. Then pay," the man said simply. "Or maybe she starts paying another way." The rage that surged through me was white hot. I grabbed him by the collar, slamming him against the side of my truck. His partner reached for something inside his jacket, but I growled, "Don't." My voice was low, dangerous, the kind of tone I hadn't used in years but remembered all too well from fights at the docks. The man sneered, even as my grip tightened. "You can scare me, old man. But you can't scare the dead away." I released him with a shove, my chest heaving. "Tell Kevin this. If he sends anyone near my daughter again, it won't be words next time." They straightened their jackets, smirking like jackals. One of them tapped the hood of my truck. "Clock's ticking, Peterson. Better decide what she's worth to you." Then they walked off, disappearing into the alley. I stood there, shaking, fury and dread twisting inside me. That evening, Anna came to my room, her eyes wide with worry. "Dad, someone followed me back from the store. 2 men in a car. They didn't say anything, but they were watching me." I closed my eyes, the truth settling like lead in my gut. Kevin had dragged us into something darker than just unpaid bills. These weren't collectors, they were enforcers. And they weren't going to stop. I looked at her, my voice steady though my insides churned. "Pack a bag. Tonight." She blinked. "What? Where are we going?" "Somewhere they won't find us," I said. "If Kevin wants to play this game, fine. But he's not taking you down with him." For years I had carried her through storms. I thought those days were behind us. But as I helped her gather her things, I realized the truth. I had disappeared once before. Now I was about to do it again, but this time, with her by my side. And Kevin had no idea what kind of reckoning was coming his way. When you've spent your whole life being the man who stays put, who fixes, who shoulders the weight, running doesn't come natural. But that night, as I shoved Anna's bag into the back of my truck and pulled her into the passenger seat, I knew there was no other choice. Kevin's debts weren't numbers on paper anymore, they had faces, fists, and eyes that had found us. The harbor town was quiet as we rolled out, the moon hanging low over the black water. Anna sat rigid beside me, her hands knotted in her lap, her face pale in the glow of the dash lights. For a long while neither of us spoke. The hum of the engine filled the silence, steady as a heartbeat. Finally she broke it. "I can't believe it's come to this," she whispered. I tightened my grip on the wheel. "It's not your fault." "Yes, it is," she said quickly, her voice sharp with guilt. "I defended him. I believed him. I begged you to help him. And now look at us. Running like criminals because of the man I chose." I glanced at her, then back at the empty road stretching ahead. You made a mistake, Anna. We all do. What matters now is you learn from it. What matters is you see him for who he really is. She swallowed hard, staring out the window. I do. God help me, I do now. We drove for hours, trading the salt air of the coast for the thick woods inland. By dawn, we reached a small town that looked like time had forgotten it. One gas station, a diner, and a row of boarded-up shops. I pulled into the parking lot of a rundown motel and killed the engine. We'll stay here a few nights, I said. Keep our heads down, figure out the next move. Anna nodded, though her eyes stayed wary. She'd never seen me like this before, strategic, guarded, almost dangerous. The tired father who once stumbled through double shifts had been replaced by a man she didn't quite know. But maybe that was what she needed now. Inside the motel, the air smelled of mildew and cigarettes. We took a single room with 2 beds, the thin carpet stained, the curtains frayed. Anna sat on the edge of one bed clutching her bag, while I stood at the window, watching the parking lot, scanning every car that pulled in. By afternoon, the tension had settled into our bones. We ate sandwiches from the diner, barely tasting them. Anna tried to nap, but every creak of the building jolted her awake. I sat in a chair by the door, my old instincts from dock fights returning, always alert, always ready. Then, as the sun dipped low, her phone buzzed. She froze. It's him. My chest tightened. Kevin? She nodded, showing me the screen. Dozens of missed calls, messages spilling down the thread. The latest one made my blood boil. You think you can run? They'll find you. You'll wish you'd listened to me. I took the phone, my jaw tight. Block him. Her hand shook as she did. But blocking didn't erase the threat. He knew. He had eyes somewhere, maybe everywhere. That night, as Anna finally drifted into a restless sleep, I sat at the small motel desk, staring at the cracked wallpaper. I thought of all the years I'd spent sacrificing for her, working until my body broke, swallowing pride and pain alike. I thought of how she'd turned on me when I refused to hand over everything I had for Kevin. And I thought of the 2 men who had stood at my truck, their smirks promising violence. Running couldn't last forever. They'd find us again. And when they did, I had to be ready. By morning, I had made a decision. Anna, I said as she rubbed the sleep from her eyes. We can't keep running. We have to confront this. Fear flashed across her face. Confront it? Dad, those men. I know what they are. I interrupted gently. But hiding won't stop them. Kevin brought this storm into your life, and he thinks he can walk away while it tears us apart. I won't let that stand. She stared at me, tears glistening. What are you going to do? I looked at her, my voice steady. I'm going to end this. One way or another. The truth was, I didn't know exactly how yet. But a plan had started to form in the back of my mind, sharp and dangerous. I wasn't the same man who'd quietly suffered for years. Losing her respect, being erased at her wedding, being accused of selfishness, all of it had carved me into someone harder. Someone Kevin wasn't ready for. As I checked the lock on the motel door again, I felt the old rage settle into something colder. Kevin thought he knew me. But he was about to learn what kind of man he had really provoked. Every man has a breaking point. I'd spent decades pushing mine back, swallowing anger until it curdled into quiet endurance. But now, sitting in that shabby motel room with Anna staring at me in fear and trust all at once, I felt something new settle inside me. A cold certainty. I wasn't going to run anymore. 2 days later, the storm found us again. It was early evening, the motel parking lot bathed in the orange glow of sunset. I'd stepped outside for a cigarette, something I'd given up years ago but picked up again in this pressure cooker of a life. That's when I saw the black sedan pull in, too clean, too deliberate for a place like this. 2 men climbed out, not the same ones from the docks, but cut from the same cloth. Suits a size too big, eyes too sharp, movements too casual to be anything but practiced. They looked around once, then headed straight for the stairwell leading to our room. I flicked the cigarette away and slipped inside before they saw me. Anna looked up from the bed, alarm flashing across her face. "What is it?" "They're here," I whispered. Her breath hitched. "What do we do?" I moved quickly, pulling her toward the bathroom. "Stay quiet. Lock the door. Don't come out until I say." "Dad." "Now, Anna." My tone left no room for argument. She obeyed, vanishing behind the thin door. The knock came seconds later. Sharp, deliberate. I opened the door halfway, keeping my body angled to block their view inside. "What do you want?" The taller one smirked. "Mr. Peterson, right? We've been looking for you. And your daughter. Thought you'd be smarter than to hide in a place like this." I kept my voice steady. "You've got the wrong man." The shorter one chuckled. "Don't waste our time. Kevin says you've got the cash. So here's how it goes, you pay, or the girl pays in other ways." My blood turned to ice. I stepped outside, pulling the door shut behind me, squaring myself between them and the room. "You're not touching her," the taller one sneered. "You can't protect her forever, old man. Pay what's owed, and this ends. Keep playing stubborn, and it gets ugly." I didn't answer. Instead, I let the silence stretch, my stare fixed and unblinking. It rattled him more than shouting would have. He shifted on his feet, his smirk faltering. Finally, I spoke, my voice low. "Tell Kevin he picked the wrong man to bleed. If he wants me, he can come himself. No more errand boys." Their eyes flicked between each other, uncertainty flashing. Then the shorter one stepped closer, close enough for me to smell the cheap cologne on his collar. "Careful what you wish for. He'll come. And when he does, you'll wish you'd paid." They turned and walked back to the car, their confidence faltering just enough to give me a sliver of satisfaction. The sedan roared out of the lot, leaving a trail of dust and threat behind. When I went back inside, Anna was standing in the bathroom doorway, her face pale. "Dad? I heard." I nodded. "Good. I wanted you to. You need to understand what we're dealing with." Her eyes filled with tears. "This is my fault. I brought him into our lives. I trusted him. And now you're in danger because of me." I stepped forward, cupping her face in my calloused hands. "Anna, listen to me. This isn't your fault. Loving someone isn't a crime. Believing in the wrong man isn't a crime. The crime is his. And now, I'm going to make sure he pays for it." She shook her head, terrified. "But how?" "He won't stop. Those men, he has more. He'll keep sending them until..." Her voice trailed off. "Until what?" I pressed. She swallowed hard. "Until one of us isn't here anymore." The words hung in the air like smoke. She was right. This wouldn't end with polite threats and bruised egos. Kevin had pulled us into a game where the stakes were survival. That night, as Anna finally cried herself to sleep, I sat at the small desk, scribbling notes on the motel's notepad. Contacts I still had at the docks. Places Kevin used to brag about hanging out. Old friends who owed me favors. If Kevin thought disappearing once made me weak, he was wrong. I hadn't vanished out of fear. I'd vanished because I was done being his crutch. But now that he'd brought danger to my daughter's doorstep, the rules had changed. I wasn't just a father anymore. I was a man with nothing left to lose. And Kevin was about to find out what kind of revenge a father could carve when cornered. You can prepare all you want, but when the devil finally walks through the door, you still feel that old tremor in your bones. I knew Kevin would come eventually. The collectors had been nothing more than his warning shots. And a man like Kevin, prideful, desperate, reckless, never lets someone else fight his battles for long when his ego's on the line. It was 3 nights after the encounter at the motel when it happened. The air was thick, heavy with the smell of rain. Anna was dozing lightly on her bed, the TV flickering with some late-night talk show. I sat by the window, the motel's neon sign casting a red glow across my face, My hand curled loosely around a wrench I'd taken from the truck. Then headlights swept across the lot. Not the slow roll of a traveler pulling in, but the deliberate glide of a car that knew exactly where it was headed. A black SUV this time. Bigger. Meaner. I stood, every muscle tight. "Anna," I said quietly. She stirred, blinking. "It's him." Her face drained of color. She scrambled upright, clutching her blanket as though it could shield her. "What do we do?" "Stay behind me," I said. My voice was calm, but inside my heart hammered. The knock came. 3 heavy raps on the door. Not tentative. Not polite. I opened it slowly. And there he was. Kevin. His once boyish charm was gone, stripped away by fear and fury. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair greasy, but his eyes, those slick, fast-talking eyes, burned with a desperate fire. Behind him stood 2 more men, bulkier than the last pair, their faces hard, their arms folded. "Evening, Dad," Kevin said, his smirk brittle. "Mind if we come in?" I stepped into the doorway, blocking his path. "You've got a lot of nerve showing up here." He chuckled, though the sound rang hollow. "Nerve? No, this is about responsibility. You've been hiding, playing the victim, but the truth is simple: you owe me. You owe us." My jaw clenched. "I owe you nothing." His grin faltered. "That's where you're wrong. You think this is just about money? This is about loyalty. About family. You raised Anna to believe you'd always take care of her. And now's your chance to prove it. Pay what I owe, and this all goes away." From behind me, Anna's voice trembled. "Kevin, stop. I'm done. I'm not covering for you anymore." Her words landed like stones. Kevin's smile snapped into a snarl as he peered past me. "Done? After everything I've sacrificed for us, after all my plans." "Plans?" I cut in, my voice low and sharp. "You mean scams. Lies. Every so-called opportunity you've touched has crumbled because you don't care who you hurt along the way. And now you stand here, dragging her down with you, trying to bleed me dry too. No more, Kevin. Not tonight. Not ever." The air thickened. His men shifted, waiting for a signal. Kevin's face twisted, desperation clawing through the cracks. "If you don't pay," he said, voice rising, "they'll make you. They'll take everything. Do you want to see your daughter hurt? Do you?" I stepped forward, closing the space between us until we were nose to nose. My voice dropped to a growl. "If you so much as breathe wrong in her direction, you won't walk out of here. Try me." For the first time, I saw it, a flicker of doubt in his eyes. He'd expected me to cower, to fold like I had when Anna begged. But the man standing before him now wasn't the tired father he remembered. This was someone harder, sharper, carved out of all the years of sacrifice and betrayal. One of his men shifted again, reaching inside his jacket. I raised the wrench, steady, unflinching. "Do it," I dared. "And see who hits the ground first." The moment stretched, taut as wire. Rain pattered against the roof, the neon sign buzzed overhead, Anna's breath came quick and shallow behind me. Then Kevin broke. He lifted a hand, signaling his men to stand down. His smirk returned, weaker this time, painted over fear. "Fine," he spat. "Have it your way. But this isn't over. Dead doesn't just vanish. And neither do I." He turned sharply, his men following him back to the SUV. The engine roared, headlights slicing through the night as they sped out of the lot. Silence fell, thick and suffocating. I lowered the wrench slowly, my arms trembling now that the danger had passed. Anna rushed to my side, tears spilling. "Dad, what's going to happen?" I pulled her close, holding her against my chest. My heart still hammered, but my voice was steady. "He's not finished. But neither am I." Because Kevin had made one mistake that night, he'd revealed just how desperate he truly was. And desperate men always slip. All I had to do was be ready when he finally did. There's a saying I heard once down at the docks: Desperate men don't fight for victory, they fight to survive. That makes them twice as dangerous. And Kevin was desperate. After that night at the motel, Anna barely slept. She jumped at every knock, every car engine in the lot, every shadow across the curtains. I stayed alert too, but deep down I knew Kevin wasn't coming back with fists. He'd come back with something worse, betrayal wrapped in a smile, the kind of trick that had gotten him this far in life. It happened on a Tuesday morning. We'd slipped out of the motel before dawn, heading further inland. I thought if we kept moving, we could buy time until I figured out how to cut Kevin off at the knees. Anna dozed against the window, exhausted, her hair tangled, her face pale. For a moment she looked like the little girl I once carried on my shoulders at the county fair, laughing as though the world couldn't touch her. That memory hurt more than any threat. We stopped at a diner off the highway, the kind with cracked vinyl booths and a waitress who called everyone Han. Anna went to freshen up, and that's when I saw it, the newspaper left on the counter. Kevin's face stared back at me from the local section. Not a mugshot. A photo from one of his business ventures. All smiles under the headline. Local entrepreneur accuses father-in-law of fraud. The room tilted. My hands clenched the paper so hard it crumpled. The article painted me as the villain. Kevin claimed I'd stolen money from him, sabotaged his ventures, even threatened him with violence. There were quotes, twisted and half-true, enough to make the story sound believable. Worst of all, my name was there in black and white, my town, my work at the docks, a trail straight back to me. By the time Anna returned to the booth, my pulse was hammering. She froze when she saw my face. Dad? What is it? I slid the paper across the table. She read the headline, her eyes widening. No, this isn't true. He's framing me, I said, my voice low. Turning the tables. He knows I won't pay, so now he's painting me as the criminal. Her hands shook as she gripped the paper. But people will believe him. He's always so convincing. Exactly, I said. That's his gift. Lies dressed as truth. For a moment, she looked like she might break. Then, slowly, her jaw hardened. We can't let him win. I nodded, though my chest was heavy. No. But if he's willing to do this, Anna, it means he's running out of cards. Which makes him unpredictable. And I was right. That night, as we pulled into another roadside motel, I noticed something off. The clerk behind the counter avoided my eyes, his hand twitching as he slid me the key. When I walked back to the truck, a second car pulled into the lot too quickly, its lights cutting off before it parked. Anna, I said quietly, opening the passenger door. Inside. Now. She obeyed without question, her fears sharpened into instinct. As I grabbed our bags, two figures emerged from the parked car. And behind them, stepping out last with that same brittle smirk, was Kevin. Well, he said, spreading his arms. The prodigal father and his runaway daughter. You didn't think I'd let you disappear again, did you? Anna gasped, stepping behind me. Kevin, stop this. Stop? His laugh was harsh. You don't get it, babe. This doesn't stop until I get what's mine. And if Daddy here won't pay, then maybe you will. Rage surged through me. You touch her and I swear. You'll what? He snapped, stepping closer. His men flanked him, broad and ready. You think you scare me, old man? You've been running your whole life. First from your wife's death, then from your daughter's demands, and now from me. You're nothing but a coward hiding behind your excuses. The words dug deep, because they weren't entirely lies. But they weren't truth either. I stepped forward, closing the space between us, my voice low and steady. You want to see what a coward looks like? Go find a mirror. Because when the debts came due, you didn't face them. You ran. And now you're hiding behind thugs to make yourself feel big. Kevin's smirk faltered, just for a second. Then he snarled. This ends tonight. One of his men moved, reaching into his jacket. I grabbed the nearest thing I could, the heavy motel ashtray from the curb, and raised it high. "Try me," I roared. The parking lot froze. Anna clutched my arm, trembling, but I stood firm, ready to swing. For a heartbeat, everything balanced on a knife's edge. Kevin licked his lips, his eyes darting between me, the ashtray, and the motel office window where the clerk was now peeking nervously with a phone in his hand. Cops would be here soon. Kevin knew it. He lowered his hand slowly, signaling his men to back off. "Fine," he spat, venom in every syllable. "But you haven't seen the last of me. You think you can humiliate me, turn her against me, walk away clean? No. I'll burn this whole world down before I let you win." He backed toward the car, his eyes locked on mine, promising war. Then he was gone, taillights vanishing into the night. I stood in the lot, chest heaving, the ashtray heavy in my hand. Anna clung to me, whispering through tears, "He's never going to stop, is he?" I set the ashtray down, pulling her close. "No. Not until I make him." And for the first time, I knew exactly what I had to do. This wouldn't end with running. It wouldn't end with hiding. It would only end when Kevin was stripped of the one thing he lived on, his lies. And I was the only one who could do it. There are moments you can feel the world narrowing down to a single choice, a doorway with one path leading to ruin and the other to whatever passes for justice. Standing in that motel parking lot, with Kevin's taillights still a smear in the dark, the choice felt sharp and simple. Run again and bury the shame, or stay and pull the rot out by the roots. I chose the roots. The plan didn't come from some movie memory or a sudden bolt of genius. It was as practical and ugly as the life I'd lived, favors owed, old wounds remembered, and a stubborn refusal to let a bully rewrite our story. I called the men who'd once watched my back at the docks. I visited a clerk I'd helped years ago, one who kept records and knew how to pull receipts. I found an old contact at a credit union who still had a soft spot for me. None of it was glamorous. It was a sieve of small things that, when strung together, might stop a man who sold smoke for a living. First, I needed proof. Kevin had painted me as a villain in print. He'd lied, cheated, and used charm to build a picture of himself that others wanted to believe. But charlatans always leave tracks, bounce checks, shell companies with names that smell like fortune, phone numbers that trace back to burner vendors. With the help of a friend at the credit union, I subpoenaed account records tied to the companies Kevin bragged about. The old clerk dug through county filings until he found the papers. Loans taken in names that weren't his, transfers to offshore accounts, and most damning, a pattern of wiring money to people who disappeared as quickly as the promised returns. Next, I needed witnesses. That meant walking back into places I'd promised myself I'd left behind. I visited a mechanic who'd sold Kevin parts on credit and never been paid. I found a woman in a neighboring town who'd loaned Kevin money after he told her he was on the verge, and who'd finally realized she'd been conned. One by one, they told me the same story. Kevin's mouth could turn a lie into truth, but the ledger never lied. They signed statements. They handed me receipts. They told the truth out loud for the first time, and I watched the weight of their silence lift. There was one last piece, the thing that would make his threats sound hollow and his bravado bankrupt. Kevin loved to boast, to confide in the wrong people when he was drunk and sure of himself. I'd paid for a transcript from a local bar's security camera with audio, a favor, trades, and a little money, and there it was, Kevin slurring, bragging to a pal about how he'd make the old man pay, and how the enforcers were just the rentals. He laughed about fake invoices and how easily people forgot the paper trail when someone with a smile told them otherwise. With ledgers, witness statements, and that tape, I had a box that smelled of truth. The next morning I drove to the county sheriff's office. The deputy behind the counter recognized me from town and raised his eyebrows. "Peterson?" he said. I handed the folder across. "I want to file a report," I said. The deputy leafed through the documents, his face tightening. "You sure about this? He'll make noise." He didn't say it as a warning so much as because he'd seen men like Kevin before, loud, venomous, but fragile under a stack of invoices. "I'm sure," I said, and I told them everything. Threats, the men at the truck, the forged story in the paper. I played the bar audio for them, watched the deputy's jaw drop at Kevin's voice owning what he'd done. Paperwork followed. A detective volunteered to take the statements. Within 48 hours, they had a warrant to question Kevin. I didn't expect the satisfaction of watching him cuffed. I expected things to get messy at first. But law moves like a different kind of tide, slow, relentless, and when it finally breaks, it grabs everything in its path. They found his accounts empty of the money he'd bragged about, but the wiring records tied his name to shell companies and the feed of cash out. They found invoices that matched the testimonies I'd collected. The pieces fit. The night they walked him in, he looked smaller than in the photos, the smirk replaced by a face I finally recognized for what it was, frightened and betrayed by his own lies. The sheriff read him his rights. He'd been charged with fraud, extortion, and conspiracy. The men who'd come to my truck were tied to collections Kevin hired. They were arrested too, partly to save face and partly because the paperwork painted them as accessories. It was ugly and bureaucratic and, in the end, the only kind of revenge that held up under the light, not blood and spectacle, but truth and consequence. Anna watched it all from the witness table, pale but steady. When Kevin's hands were cuffed, his eyes met hers briefly, a look of panic, of a man who'd finally understood that his stories weren't enough anymore. She didn't flinch. She didn't cry. She just exhaled like a person who'd been carrying a weight and finally set it down. The paper in the local paper that had smeared my name? The editor called the next day. He'd printed Kevin's claims without doing the digging he should have. He apologized publicly and promised a correction. The earlier article didn't erase the damage, but the new one, the one that told the truth, had a different sound. People read it, then read the court filings. Conversations around town shifted from whispered judgments to ashamed apologies. Some of Anna's old friends showed up at our door, embarrassed and contrite. It wasn't an instant fix. Trust, once cracked, doesn't glue back overnight, but it was the start. I learned something in those weeks that surprised me. The kind of respect you think comes from heroic deeds often comes from people watching you stand and do the hard, unglamorous work of truth-telling. Neighbors I'd once thought indifferent nodded in the grocery line. The mechanic left an envelope with some cash and a note that said, "For your girl. For doing what's right." The doc hands who'd once laughed at my prudence shook my hand in silence. As for me, revenge wasn't some gloating satisfaction. It felt quieter, the slow correction of a ledger, the clearing of a name, the knowledge that the man who'd terrorized my daughter had to answer for his lies in a room with fluorescent lights and paperwork instead of in one of his smoke and mirror conversations. When Kevin pleaded with the judge, when he tried to spin sympathy from spite, I watched his lies meet the ledger and fold. Anna and I didn't pretend we were healed overnight. We had long talks that dredged up things neither of us enjoyed, the years of missed dinners, the afternoons I'd work late to pay bills, the nights she'd gone hungry because I couldn't make ends meet. She told me about the quiet resentments that had grown into demands and how fear had made her cling to a man who promised escape. I told her about exhaustion and the times I'd wanted to give up but didn't because she was worth more than my pride. We said hard things. We said sorry in ways that mean more than a sentence. We didn't gloss over the past. We cataloged it, owned it, and started to stitch a map forward. The town started to look different, too. The gossip stopped being a blade, it softened into concern, then into routines of neighborliness. People saw us not as a spectacle but as a pair of humans trying to rebuild. We moved back to a small place closer to the water where I could still see the horizon each morning. I returned to the docks for a few mornings a week, not out of necessity so much as habit, and because the work kept me honest. There's a part of revenge that surprised me the most. It wasn't about making Kevin suffer for the joy of it. It was about protecting my daughter's life and dignity, and in the process reclaiming a piece of my own. When the court handed down a sentence, restitution, probation for some, jail for others, I didn't dance. I sat in the courtroom, hand on Anna's knee, and let the reality settle. Justice, even imperfect, had been served. A year later, when the ledger had mostly been cleared and the smaller creditors had agreed to payment plans that didn't ruin Anna, she sat across from me one evening as the sun slid into the harbor and said, "Dad, I was wrong. I thought you were selfish that night. I was scared, and I made you the enemy. I'm sorry." Her voice cracked. She reached across the table and took my hand. "Will you forgive me?" I looked at the lines around her eyes, at a woman who'd learned the hard geometry of life, and I thought of all the times I'd carried her. "Forgive?" I said. "You were a scared kid who picked the wrong lighthouse. That's forgivable. But more than forgive, I want us to keep going. Together." I squeezed her hand. One wrong choice doesn't erase a lifetime. We didn't promise things would be perfect. We promised this instead: honesty, presence, and that neither of us would weaponize love again. That was a small vow, but it mattered more than any grand speech. It felt, in the end, like revenge enough to set everything right, not because someone else suffered, but because the truth straightened the crooked history Kevin had tried to write. Sometimes revenge arrives as a loud storm. Sometimes it's the steady work of paper and witnesses, of neighbors and dockhands, of a sheriff who believes the ledger when words wobble. I learned to prefer the slow kind. It leaves less wreckage in its wake, and it helps you keep what matters most. Standing on the pier now, years later, I watch the tide pull at the boats and think of how close we came to losing everything. Anna is beside me sometimes, her laughter threading into the gulls. We don't pretend the past didn't happen, but we don't let it define us either. Kevin's name is a closed chapter. We rebuilt from the wreckage. And the life I disappeared for, the life I returned to fight for, turned out to be worth more than any nest egg or bitter pride. If you asked me now whether I'd do it all over again, leave first, return later, collect truth like kindling, I'd say yes. Because some battles aren't won by running. They're won by staying, by gathering proof, and by making sure the truth outlives the lies. And sometimes, that's the kind of revenge that finally lets you sleep. That was my story. Now I'd like to hear yours. Share it in the comments below.